Welcome to Saturday's Warrior, the channel where we talk all things BYU and Big 12, but we also love to talk about realignment, which is why I've got with me today my friend WildUte joining us from the the well,
College Football Mafia.
yeah. So it's grown and adapted. So from College Football
That's
Mafia,
right.
and
Mhm.
and Ute and I, we both really love looking at the analytics of all this stuff, and which is why I wanted to bring him on, because today we want to talk about the ACC. Everyone's kind of waiting to see what happens there, especially with Florida State. And if you're not aware of all this stuff, you definitely got to go check out their channel. I'll put the link in the description, because out of all the YouTube, there's tons of good YouTube content out there, but I feel like they're the one most comprehensive. They're covering every angle of this all the time. So you got to go check them out. Very thorough. And so we want to take a look at both of us independently have kind of come up with. So this isn't real hard numbers. This is really kind of pseudoscience here, but the percentage likelihood of where, if the ACC does implode, where each of the member schools of the ACC might end up. And so we put percentage to it, whether it's Big 12, SEC, any of the other conferences. Um, and now we're gonna go through that list, and we'll talk through it and see where we end up on that. But before we get any further, another reason why I wanted to have you on is you're doing a great segment there with your channel, with the WildUte University. So tell us a little bit about that and what you got going on there.
Yeah, for sure. So WildUte University is a project that was formed a couple months back where the idea was trying to build like a model, like a data-based model to show historical facts and almost predict where realignment movements would happen. Okay, that's the idea. Like we hear a lot in the realignment game. Hey, there's smoke. Your source, Trevor. My source is saying this. So there's like always moving parts with like what the rumor mill says, the gossip train says, which is fun. That's cool. But like you and I are finance guys, right? We like the data. So the idea was like, okay, what does the data say about this? The data doesn't tell you everything that's going on, but it reveals a lot. So a good perspective is like, okay, so the decision makers in realignment, the presidents of these universities, the media companies, they're going to want to have data to make their decisions at the end of the day on where schools are going to go. And so, can you replicate similar data structures that like an analyst would put in front of the executives and presidents to make those decisions? That was the goal behind it, to build a model out to show, hey, like this is a really good candidate, or this one seems like it's a good candidate, it's a paper tiger. So WildUte University is more of a model-based system to take a look at that to see really where they stack up based on the facts. Doesn't mean it's going to happen like that at the end of the day. It's not a guarantee, but it shows where the decisions could be made, essentially. So I'm really excited to have this conversation because we're going to be diving into a lot of these ACC teams to see where they stack up and everything. I want to get your perspective. Everyone that's listening, I want your perspective too in the comments and everything, because everyone's thoughts are they're all relevant here. Like everyone's thoughts are relevant. We're all just throwing out the data and how we think of it too. But sharing those thoughts actually kind of calibrates us a little bit more in this game too.
Yeah, so you're definitely. I appreciate that, and I think this conversation fits in really well with what you're doing, and I think it's going to give you a leg up on me as you've dived deeper into the data. A lot of mine is gut feeling, or what I've
Sure.
seen and listened to, like everybody else, and what the evidence that I've seen that's out there. But it's certainly. I think all of us certainly expect there to continue to be more and more changes, and we're all kind of waiting to see. And like you said, there are some signs, and we can look at it. So, before we go any further, my obligatory, please, if you love college football realignment, please give this video a like, subscribe, and also please go check out WildUte and all of his content. Again, I'll put that in the comments. So, all right. Without any further ado, so here we've got. I know, Wild, you support both K-State and Utah, so obviously I went with the purple.
You threw up that purple for the Cats. Go
Yeah,
Cats.
for some reason, I went with the purple over
Nice.
the red.
Oh yeah, I can see that. I can see it.
But here, so
Mhm.
basically, just to, I kind of spoke to this already, but so we've got each conference on here that will be, oh, here, my mouse, bring it over to the right screen. But we've got each conference on here on kind of likelihood of where each one of the schools from the ACC could end up, whether Big Ten, SEC, maybe a new rebuilt version of the ACC from the fragments, Big 12, and other. And then other could be American Independence, a new PAC conference, a brand new it could be whatever. So there was a lot of different outcomes. So I just kind of lumped all that together into one other category. So with that, I figured because there's been so much talk with FSU, and they seem to be a big part of the catalyst of this, I figured we would start with the Seminoles. So what's your read on Florida State?
You're coming out strong then, Trevor. Yeah, with Florida State. And they're the ones that are going to really screw things up for everybody else here. They're the ones that are almost out of the ACC. Like, if you haven't heard, Florida State's in a lawsuit with the ACC to get out of the conference and try to figure out how much it's going to cost to get out of the ACC, but they're basically gone. So if you're looking at that column for the rebuild ACC, column D there, I would say there's a 0% chance that Florida State's going to be, we're talking probably in the medium term here, right? We're not talking about next year. We're talking like, what, 5 years for this too, Trevor?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like for this
yeah.
idea.
Yeah. I'm not saying like ever, but I'm just talking about through this next wave of realignment.
Yes. Okay. So really staying in the ACC is just not tenable. It's not going to happen for the Florida State Seminoles. So they're getting a big fat 0 there for the ACC. Really, the question is, where is a good spot for the Noles? Like, they clearly have a spot. They wouldn't be going down this pathway with all the lawsuits and everything else if they didn't have a spot. And plus, they're one of the big brands that are available out there in the ACC and the Big 12, that the Big 10 and the SEC are both going to want. So really, if you're looking at it, I know Big 12 fans want the Noles. I don't think that's realistic. I would give it a 0% shot at happening in the Big 12. And the other, like the best of the rest of idea, where maybe the Florida State broke away with Miami and some other schools like in the Big 12, I don't think that's really realistic either. I'll throw out a 0. So really, you're looking at the two.
That's kind of come out the last couple of days is taking a subsection of the best brands from the ACC and starting a new conference.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's the new
0?
thing. I would say it's a 0% chance for the Florida State Seminoles to do that. It's just too dang costly at the end of the day. Like, what kind of media contract, if there was a best of the rest conference, like, it's going to be better than the ACC and the Big 12 currently have, but is it enough to pay the price to leave the ACC? I don't think so. I think you need Big 10 or the SEC money at that juncture for the Noles. So you're really looking at the Big 10 and the SEC here. And where will the Noles end up? I'm saying an 80% likelihood to the Big 10 and 20% to the SEC. The Big 10 seems to be a great fit. It gets them into Florida and the Southeast. They are trying to grow the research program out there. And the research spending in Florida State, they look to be flirting a lot with the Big 10. It just seems like a great fit. And plus, like with the SEC, I mean, I know that'd be a defensive play for the SEC to grab Florida State, but really at the end of the day, there's more value that Florida State brings to the Big 10 than the SEC. So I think the Big 10 is going to fight really hard to get the Noles, and I think they're going to get them at the end of the day.
Yeah, I know you make a great case. So I was a little bit more even, although I know that the SEC is reluctant to add new schools in states where they already exist, except they did just go ahead and do that with Texas. But I know they've also been, they've been much more strategic to in their additions. And I don't know if they would just add Florida State for the sake of adding. You could say it's a defensive move to keep the Big 10 out of their backyard. I don't know if it's the case. Having said that, I mean, you're convincing me. I probably didn't rank it high enough. I was saying more like actually I had 44 because I was saying, I think they've shattered all relationship with the ACC. I don't see that happening. And for the Big 12, I think that I left a 1%. There is a chance that for whatever reason, and then 0 for other, that for whatever reason that the maybe things fall through. Maybe Big 10 goes another direction, or they're getting too big, and the SEC, for the reasons I just said, don't want them, that they have to find another home in the short term, or Big 10's like, yeah, we want you, just not yet. So I could see I don't know. I would just, it's probably even less than one, but I said, kind of, there's a chance, but yeah, I don't think it's very likely. I think 0 is about right on that one. So,
Yeah. Mhm.
and yeah, it definitely leads more Big Ten. So I think I like yours on this one. So you're already off to a good start. The other school that's been kind of lumped with Florida State, although they've been taking kind of a different approach to exiting the ACC, is Clemson.
Yeah, Clemson's an interesting one, and there's real recent information that was put out by Ross Dellinger that suggests that Clemson is actually getting ready to bring lawsuit against the ACC in addition to Florida State. So that's look out for that here in the near future and everything. So Clemson is thinking they're going to get out of the ACC too, and they're going to be fighting to get out of the ACC. Different scenario than Florida State. Florida State's a little bit more of a slam dunk candidate to the Power Two, meaning the Big Ten and the SEC, than Clemson. But Clemson still is a big time brand, and they bring big time value too. So they're going to be an attractive candidate. So really, where do they fit? Okay, so if we're going back to see if it's in the Big Ten or the SEC, I think that Clemson is actually a 60% shot at getting into the Big Ten conference. I'd put the SEC at 30%, and I'd put remaining in a restructured, rebuilt ACC at 10%. So I'd put it at a 60, 30, 10 for the Big Ten, the SEC, and a rebuilt ACC. That would mean that for the Big 12, I'm giving there a 0% chance of Clemson going to the Big 12. I know that's not going to make a lot of Big 12 fans happy. I get it. It would be awesome to bring the Tigers in. I want them in the Big 12. I just don't think it's realistic at all. I don't think that Clemson's going to be jumping on to the best of the rest or going to the Pac-2 or the AAC or anything else. So really, at the end of the day, there's 3 real landing spots. I think the Big Ten is the most likely. The reasoning for that is because it brings new geographic territory. So if the Big Ten does land Florida State, then all of a sudden Clemson's right there in South Carolina to bridge essentially as a geographic travel partner. Plus that brings a big time football brand there, and you've got access to the Atlanta market because Clemson's about 1 hour away from Atlanta in Georgia. So there's some advantages for the Big Ten to get Clemson. And I think that at the end of the day, while the SEC might want Clemson, I think the Big Ten is going to pull them in.
Yeah, I agree. I think they will, and I did. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Last second, I threw it into a new spreadsheet and realized all my formulas and things didn't come over. So I probably again made this too close. I was saying 48 or 47. Again, that's because I gave a one. Oh wait, I forgot. I did say rebuilt ACC. I don't know why I said that. I was just thinking maybe there's a chance, just because of how difficult things are and things are going, and then maybe a 1% chance for Big 12. But I think most likely, I agree with you on this. The Big 10 is the most likely outcome. Although I do think, they have better odds of ending up in the SEC than Florida State does. They just feel kind of like an SEC school, and they are a great brand. And fit within that footprint, but also I think they're just such a big brand. I don't see any realistic way that they don't fall out of the big 2 schools unless it's just like a timing thing, and again it's like looking for a temporary home or something.
I think you nailed it. I do, and it's an odd one though because Clemson does feel like an SEC school. Like you're not the first person to say that, Trevor. A lot of folks feel that way, and it's true. But at the end of the day, what does Clemson bring to the SEC? SEC owns Atlanta market with the Georgia Bulldogs. They have the state of South Carolina with the Gamecocks. So SEC, do they really bring a lot of value to the SEC? I don't think nearly as much value to the SEC as the Big Ten. I think that's going to be the swing factor. And we're talking we can get super granular here. Okay, so Florida State's probably a 100% share distribution school. They go into the Big Ten, they're going to get 100% share, just like a USC, an Ohio State, everybody else. Clemson, if they're added to the Big Ten or the SEC, they're probably looking at a 50% distribution like Oregon State and Washington. They're probably not 100% distribution for the first contract cycle. That's the kind of brand. They're good brand, solid brand, but not as strong as Florida State. So I'm thinking Big Ten at 50% distribution to get pretty granular on that one. So that's how the Tigers kind of shake out.
That's true. And just back to the point on they're more like an SEC school. I actually did a video back with a trade machine with if conferences could make trades, just like in the NBA trade machine with players, and I worked up a trade. I don't know if it would be viable, but basically getting SE or South Carolina and Clemson along with some other schools in a trade there to get value. But anyway, I agree. Clemson is a strong brand, but they don't have quite the same legacy as some of these other brands, where Florida State, even when they're not good, continue to be really strong. Whereas Clemson, they kind of look like they're on a downward trajectory. And I don't know if their brand has that same kind of staying power, since they don't have that same legacy that some of these other schools have. So, but again, I don't see them slipping out of the top two, these big two somehow. Okay. Now Miami, how do they fit in?
Miami is an interesting one. I love this exercise. It's so much fun just to talk about this and look at these and kind of speculate a little bit. I think Miami is a pretty strong Big Ten candidate here. And I'm going to put a 75% chance that these guys end up in the Big Ten. And that would make the remaining 25%. I'd say half goes to the SEC. That's 12 and a half. Then I would say half goes into the rebuild ACC. And so that means the Big 12 other would be a 0 for the Hurricanes. I don't think that the Hurricanes are going to end up in the Big 12, and they're not going to be in the best of the rest, because I don't think the best of the rest is actually going to happen. I don't think it's not a really realistic solution at the end of the day, as far as the cost of getting out of the conference and what distribution they can get as far as a media contract goes for best of the rest. But I think the Big Ten, going back to the fit here for Miami, the market is a strong market, while the DMA for Miami is smaller than you'd think. I think there's less than 2 million people, like, as in the designated market area, like TV households in Miami. It's still good. And plus, you bring a strong football brand with the Hurricanes, the historical football brand there. And I think that just these Big Ten schools would enjoy having a trip, when it gets cold out, going down to Miami. Like, you think about your Ohio State Buckeyes and everything. It's cold in the fall. It's getting to winter time. Just jumping down there to Miami for a game down there would be pretty enjoyable, I think. So there's some value adds. Plus, you can pair that with a Florida State and a Clemson possibility to have more of a pod system stuff for geography and travel reasons. So I think that Miami makes sense to the Big Ten mostly. And then again, I guess 12.5% to the SEC and the rebuild ACC if the Big Ten doesn't happen. It's hard to see with the SEC because there's kind of some bad blood historically between Miami and the SEC, but it still offers a new market for the SEC down in South Florida. And then in the rebuild ACC, it could happen if the Hurricanes get left behind. And I think they'd probably vow to stay in the ACC without jumping over to the Big 12. But going back to it, Big Ten Conference, probably another candidate for 50% media revenue share, kind of like Clemson. They're both sitting in that same bucket there, whereas Florida State's 100%.
Yeah. So this one we're a bit closer on in these initial percentages. I think Big Ten is the best fit by far. And I think in terms of, Big Ten expansion, I remember looking back at this was months ago, but just the amount of alumni that are in the Miami area from Big Ten schools is actually quite large, and one of the larger locations outside of the existing Big Ten footprint. And so, so when you look at that thinking, okay, where can we go? Where can we hold events? Or where are we going to get a big draw from Big Ten alumni? So that makes sense, as well as all the other reasons that you outlined for Miami being a fit there. I don't think the SEC seems very likely. I think they're okay there. I guess you make a good point in terms of it being a new part of the state of Florida. And so maybe that's a compelling reason to increase that a little bit. I also don't know about the rebuilt ACC. I just don't know if there's enough value. I did put, however, a little bit more odds of the Big 12 being a possibility. And it is And maybe that's just wishful thinking. Maybe that I don't really think it's very likely. So maybe 15 is too high, but I just think that there's a chance, there's a world where the Big Ten is expanding and maybe they take Florida State, maybe they take Clemson, and maybe they say, you know what, we're already set for down here. We're getting too big. We can't double up on a state. I don't know. So I just see there, and then the SEC turns them away or whatever. I can just see a chance. And then at that point, I really think the Big 12 would be the best landing spot for them. Although I think a big deterrent for either Florida State or Miami for ever joining the Big 12 is the fact that UCF was there first, and then they have to go and join little brother, not even little brother. I mean, this is like your little cousin, and join their conference and share that and be on equal footing with them there. I don't know if I see that. So maybe I'm making a case against myself there.
You know what? Let me ask you this question, okay? So would Miami be the biggest brand in the Big 12 if they came in?
Probably.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
a slam dunk ad for the Big 12. If you ever get Miami, Clemson, or Florida State, that automatically is the strongest brand in the entire conference. And it's just so hard to pull that type of stuff in realignment. And would Miami be willing to jump over to the Big 12 compared to stay in the ACC, especially if Clemson stayed in the ACC? Those two could build maintain a decent conference. It seems kind of like a hard sell, but I would love to see it as a Big 12 fan. That would be fantastic to get the Hurricanes in conference.
As you can tell, WildUte and I were going just a bit long in our conversation, so we've broken this video down into multiple parts, so please be sure to go check those out. And if it's a bit long for you, just put it on double speed and you will zip right through. That's what I do. Also, please be sure to like the video, subscribe to this channel, especially if you like college realignment talk, and now go check out part 2.